Thank you for the nice introduction and many thanks for the invitation. Okay, thanks a lot. So as Kirill said, my name is Biljana. I'm a postdoc at the University of Manchester. And this seminar will be like an overview of how we analyzed some of the data sets at CERN as part of the experiment I'm from. It's called LHCb. And in general, what are the challenges in particle physics that we try to tackle there. So I'll start with a bit of an introduction, then I'll speak about how these experiments are made and what is their aim of measuring. Then I will speak a bit about the case for machine learning in our measurements, a few selected results recently from our collaboration, and we'll end up with a summary. So one thing that is a current quest in science is to try to understand universe asymmetry. So as we know, things started, or what we think we know, is that with the matter was created during the Big Bang, and then there was a period of inflation of the universe, after which we ended up with a whole lot of matter, which is essentially around us, and we are still unsure where's the rest of the antimatter. What we know is that when matter and antimatter connect, or let's say collide, they annihilate, and we have a light produced after that. So there are different theories, like in science, how we can where we can find the lack of the antimatter. However, there haven't been much experimental, let's say, confirmation of this. And one thing that let me stay here for a bit. And one thing that we also want to answer at CERN is if we can study these matter and antimatter particles, let's say, within proton collisions, essentially. So all this in particle physics is backed up on a theory called the Standard Model. This is a quantum field theory that describes the fundamental particles that we are essentially made of, and the forces and how they bind together. So if we look at the sketch here, this is the Standard Model fundamental particles. So we start from the purple ones, which are the quarks, and then they're divided in 3 different generations, we call them. And how you go from lower to higher generation, the mass of this particle is growing, so they're ordered by the mass. Then below them, we have the leptons, which are lighter particle. We have electron and electron-like particles, such as the electron, muon, and the tau, and they're accompanied with neutrinos, which are almost massless particles, and they're essentially, in decays, they always come together, let's say, with some of the leptons. So the quarks are the binding agents, let's say, of our matter. This is what the protons and the neutrons are made of. And what we know that also we have, let's say we have the full atom, which is composed of a proton, neutron, and an electron. And all our matter is made of the first generation of all these quarks and leptons, if we go down the first column here. The other two, it was experimentally confirmed that they exist, and we can make different combinations of different particles. However, all the other particles, combinations of quarks, can decay very fast. And this is the idea of why we want to study them, because they decay very fast. We can make different combinations of quarks, and we can probe the structure of matter. So how they bind together is with connection to the bosons on the right-hand side, where we can have a gluon, which mediates the strong force, which binds the quark together. Then we have the photons, which are the electromagnetic force, and what we call a weak force, mediated by these Z and W particles, in which the leptons usually take action, let's say. And the last one, which is the spectacular result from the LHC, which was predicted by the theory, but only found in 2012, is the Higgs boson, which essentially provides, let's say, theoretically wise, provides the mass to all the other combinations of quarks. The Higgs is very interesting to study, and this is subject to a few other experiments at CERN. However, I want to put the focus today on what we call a flavor sector, or flavor physics. Flavor physics is just the name of all these different types of quarks and different combinations that we can make. As you saw on the previous slide, there was this U, D, S, C, B, and T type of quarks. They all have different mass, and they're divided by charge. So one can make different combinations of them. In fact, we are made of protons, neutrons, and electrons. The protons have two of these U or up type quarks, one down type quark, and then the neutrons have two D and one up. So we are essentially made of these combinations. So what happens now with the rest of them? At CERN, we essentially would like to study how the matter is made, and we would like to produce essentially some of these particles and to be able to look at their properties and then further study, for example, how the forces act on different types of particles and how let's say the proton is held together. Unfortunately, the quarks cannot be studied in isolation. They do not exist like that, so they are always bound in different particles. And relevant to this talk are the B mesons, for which the experiment I'm from is designed to measure. So they're combinations of two quarks, where always we have the B meson, if you remember here. This was one of the third generation meson, sorry. And one can make different combinations that can be a positively, negatively charged particle, the one that contains S or a D quark, and so on. So the idea is to look at some of these particles in the proton collision. So the proton-proton collision is CERN. The protons are very complex objects after the collision because we have, let's say, process of hadronization after this, of which many different types of quarks can recombine, let's say, and produce different particles, and as well they can re-emit and emit the different particles, they can recombine and so on. These collisions are made at very high energies such that they allow us to detect many different types of these particles. However, since they're quite complex, they're also very busy, and a lot of noise is coming out of all of these collisions, which is usually connected to, and usually in our analysis, we would like to reject somehow this kind of noise, and we're looking for some pattern, some signal in these busy data. A bit more on the LHC. So this is the Large Hadron Collider is a 27-kilometer ring. It's situated in Geneva, essentially at the border in between France and Switzerland in Geneva. And on this ring we have collisions of protons, so they circulate in two opposite beams, and they collide at 4 different points, if you see here on the left side. And these collision points are registered by a specific set of hardware components or experiments or detectors. And all these 4 points are meant to, let's say, investigate specific types of particles, B meson, D mesons, the Higgs boson, and so on. Just quickly how we get the beam. So before we actually land on this big circle with the 4 yellow points, so the protons, they're injected in the accelerator complex, let's say, and we start first with accelerating them in the proton cyclotron, where the energy is going up. Then from there they enter the super proton cyclotron, where they get energies not really the speed of light, but close to that. And then finally they enter the large circle, which is the actual LHC. So I'm coming from one of these experiments, which is the LHCb, the one on the right side. It stands for Large Hadron Collider Beauty or B experiment, because we are aiming to produce and search for particles with a B quark. This is a collaboration. Usually all of these experiments are large collaborations, so around LHCb is around 1,800 people. We have around 100 institutes around the world and 25 countries. And this photo is essentially the photo of the cavern. All these 4 experiments are situated 100 meter underground, and you can see the size of the detector if you compare with the person that is standing in the middle. And so a bit on the experiment or the detecting system. So this the LHCb started taking data from 2011 until 2012, which was the first run or the first data taking period. Then there is a period of shutdown. And the second data taking period started in 2015 and lasted until 2018. Usually these periods of shutdowns are essential because going from one run to another, we increase usually the energy and the luminosity. And usually the hardware, the software needs to be upgraded, redone, or let's say redesigned to tackle these challenges. So that's why we have some breaks in between the data taking periods. Now we're collecting still data in the run 3 period until mid-2026, after which we will have another shutdown and we prepare for the high luminosity run 4 and 5. This is a sketch of the experiment. So what happens is we have the proton collision. That one is happening on the left, where it says Vertex Locator. And what is happening there is that we have the protons colliding, and we register hits inside the detector in this Vertex Locator, which this one is made from many different planes of silicon strip detector or pixel detector in the new one. So we register the hits inside of this, and we call this is my primary vertex or primary interaction region. From there, many different types of particles are produced, and they usually fly or go through the rest of the detector. And each of the sub-detector, let's say, part has a specific use case into detecting or, let's say, noting some information about the particles. So this I mentioned first. So first we have the Vertex Locator, where we detect our, let's say, localize the proton collision. Then we have the particle decaying and is trying to pass through the rest of the detector, where we detect hits in the tracking planes. These are these T1, T2, and T3, and the one before the magnet. These are needed in order for us to be able to reconstruct the particle trajectory through the system. Then we have the magnet. This is the magnet is needed because we would like to measure the momentum of, or essentially the speed of this particle. If we have charged particles, which is quite usual to have one, we can bend them, and then from the curve of the trajectory we can measure the momentum. So this allows measurement of the momentum. Then we also measure their energy in the calorimeters. These are these two planes at the back. One of them is electronic, which stops the electron-like particles, and then the other one is the hadronic, which stops all the other particles. So we can measure the energy with the information from here. And then we also would like to identify the particle, of which we have a combination of different inputs from various detectors. But let's say one of them who gives the most information is what we call a ridge. There are two of them on the left, and then a bit at the end of the system, and they work on the principle of ring imaging Cherenkov detector. So when we have the particle reaching the speed of light, and traveling through a medium, essentially a cone. We have a cone in which the particle travels, and there are rings that can be detected for the different types of particles. And all this information somehow is fed up through a software system that we can read off after we collect the data. So a bit on how the data is collected. So we the proton bunches come out at a fixed rate of 40 megahertz. And this is creating quite a big data set of around 5 terabytes per second, really to be collected at the experiment. It's not possible to store of this data, and also is not necessary because most of it is some background noise or something that really cannot really work with when we want to analyze that. So we have we designed, let's say, a triggering system, which is a set of algorithms that is able to select the interesting types of events, or is able to, let's say, reconstruct the particle of interest during data taking. And this is running real time to be able to, let's say, lower down this rate to some acceptable data that we can actually save for offline analysis. And this is some sort of a sketch of our trigger system. So we start on the left side in the yellow blob, where we take where we take the proton-proton collision, those come through the hardware. Then we do a detector readout from the hardware hits, let's say. After this, we have a fully software trigger, essentially the set of algorithms. The first set of algorithms is doing sort of partial reconstruction of this dataset, not full, and is rejecting unnecessary, let's say, trunks or particles. And this one runs on GPUs. It's called the HLT1 or high-level trigger one. This one is lowering down the rate significantly. But then we also need, or we have a need to calibrate our system, again, during data taking in real time. And therefore, we have this buffer in the middle where we park a bit of the selected data from the first part, and we run this calibration procedure. The conditions from this, then they're fed again to the HLT1 and then the second stage of the trigger. After we have this calibration finished, which is essential to provide good quality data. We have the second part of the trigger, which is another set of selections which run on CPUs now. And after this, they're ready for offline processing and they're stored on the CERN grid. So this is one thing that we have to go through even before, as analysts, we touch the data. So this is, let's say, the real-time selection that all the data set undergoes. As I mentioned several times, since we have these large data sets, we also have busy data sets. We have several cases or many cases for machine learning in the trigger, offline analysis, and so on. So I will not be able to speak about all of them, but I will try to maybe give a short overview in some of them. For example, in track reconstruction, when we have the hits of the detectors in the different planes, we can also, for example, have some fake tracks that we want to reject, and we can use machine learning there. Then in the trigger, when we want to select many different signatures of these particles, in the particle identification, when we collect, let's say, the information from many different hardware components into one decision. On analysis level, when we want to reject further backgrounds that are present in the data, and even in simulation, because normally in our analysis, we take our real data, but then we have to back this up or validate some concepts with simulation. So we have to reproduce the full proton collision in simulation as well. A bit on the track reconstruction. So the idea is this is a simplified picture. Let's say we have our detector planes here, and these are the hits that we register. On the left side, we don't really know if this is a particle, if there's a track, where is it, and so on. So how do we make an actual trajectory from this? How do we match it to the correct particle? We need to do this in order to, let's say, because in the detector, we always see the final state particle, which doesn't decay further. So we need that one in order to, let's say, see what was the mother particle or what was the origin of the decay we're working with. So usually what happens here is that we have one segment starting from the vertex locator where the primary collision is. And then we extrapolate or go to the other planes of the detector. We open a search window where we do a chi-square fit of this track, and then the points which have a bad chi-square, they're rejected. And in addition to this, we have another, let's call it a recovery loop, where this is being checked by our neural network if in case the track that we reconstructed is a fake one, or maybe if it comes, let's say, from some additional hadronic interaction in the detector, or maybe is incorrectly matched to some segment and so on. So a neural network here is implemented again in the trigger while we take data. This is in the real-time procedure. And this one reduces a certain type of background, which is this horizontal background that you see in the plot in the bottom, called the fake track rate, and fake track background. With adding this neural network, we reduce this rate from 22% of this background to 14%. So this is quite nice. And also the whole reconstruction sequence is faster because we remove these tracks on time before we continue to reconstruct everything. On this plot here, you can see a plot of a mass plot, invariant mass plot of two particles. And in blue, we can see the signal, and then in red, we can see this background, which is not really, which is where our aim is to really reject this kind of background as much as we can before we park our data in offline. Then we have something which is called a topological trigger. So the aim of this part of the trigger is to find different signatures, different B hadron topologies in the detector or in the event. So it can be a combination of two tracks, a two-body composite, or maybe it can be a 3 tracks, or a 2 plus 1 track, and so on. This is needed because on analysis level, we would like to search, let's say, for some particular decay, or we want to find it in our event. So this kind of setup really helps into filtering as well. The approach we use here is with this Lipschitz neural network. So the idea of this neural network is that its output is we can bound the output of this neural network to be monotonic with respect to some feature of interest that we think is a discriminating feature. And this constant of the gradient of this function is called the Lipschitz constant. This is just the mathematical approach. However, in this neural network, we can decide the monotonicity where to go, in which variables. And we usually, because we want to separate this kind of cases, 2-body, 3-body, and different, or make the trigger as inclusive as possible, we take some geometric, let's say, variables, which are connected to the decay. So if you look at the sketch on the right side, we have this proton interaction region, which is labeled as PV, primary vertex. And then we have a particle, and this particle is flying some certain distance labeled as L, and then is decaying in different types of tracks. So we can measure this distance L in the detector, and we can have it as input to the neural network. This is the flight distance. Then we can also have this additional normal, let's say, distance called the impact parameter from the secondary part where we have the decay to the primary vertex. And all these inputs are quite valuable in order to discriminate, let's say, the proper 2 or 3-body combination with respect to the, let's say, other backgrounds in the system. And on these plots here is just a comparison of different infrastructures that were tested on this use case. So let's look at the first row first. On the x-axis, we have x and y-axis are different features that were used in the neural network. So on the left one, we have unconstrained neural network, and the other two are monotonic infrastructures. So the more blue you see, the more signal we select, and the rest, the whitish and the red parts are the background. So you can see that in the unconstrained part, we somehow the system thinks that we have background on the right, in the right corner, which is not the case in the monotonic parts. Then if we go in the monotonic boosted decision tree, here we see that we reject this background in the right hand side, but then on the left hand side there is some jagged or undefined, let's say, boundary in between the signal and the background. And then with this monotonic Lipschitz neural network, we actually see the best, let's say, performance. So this is something that we were the most happy with when testing. And on the bottom, you have another 3 plots where is plotted the signal efficiency as function of the lifetime of this particle, and then as expected, there's some linear dependence in the unconstrained one, and then a rather smooth dependence in the monotonic one. Then this is something we are working on. Is not I cannot show you any plots, but what we're testing is to have a full event interpretation. The reason for this is that as we go in the next periods of data taking, we will have busier and busier events because the energy of the collisions will rise. This is how the LHC is designed to work. So this means that now or nowadays, or in the past years when we were taking data, we would expect, let's say, one signal per event that we wanted to find in our proton collision. But then after the year 2030 or so, we will have multiple signals per event and even higher background. And you can see the event display on the bottom here, how it looks like. So the idea of this is somehow to sorry, I have there's some alarm here. Oh, okay. Sorry about that. So the idea of this is to come up with some maximally efficient trigger, where we would have input several different or many different decisions for all the different types of the trigger, and we will use a graph neural network. This is still into, let's say, under revision or under is a work in progress, but this is something that also other experiments such as CMS and a BEL2 experiment have already been implementing in different environments. So there is some interesting prospect here as well. Now I will go into a few selected results. Maybe these are a bit biased because I've been involved in some of them, but maybe it will give you an overview of what types of analysis can be done in LHCb. So I have 3 points of interest, how we do analysis when we search for these differences in between matter and antimatter, how we can look for new particles, and how we are able to find rare signals in these data sets. So first was the baryon asymmetry. The idea of this kind of measurements was to test, to produce essentially in the proton collisions one particle and its antiparticle, and to try to measure their properties and see if we get something different of one particle with respect to another one. And these kind of properties were measured in the past, nicely found in the meson particle, which are 2 quarks, but never really found in any combination of 3 quarks, which is quite interesting because the matter around us is made of 3 combination of quarks. And as you can see here on this timeline, this was started in the 50s, or let's say theoretically wise was also studied since the 50s, and not until 25 the LHCb confirmed evidence, let's say, of differences in the baryon segment. So we have chosen to work on this particular decay. We call it a lambda baryon. It's composed of a proton, a kaon, which is another meson combination of 2 different quarks, and 2 pion. So we have these 4 particles that we can compose in one and make a baryon. The idea of the measurement is to try to measure, let's say, the number of events we get from its particle and its antiparticle. So if the particle is proton kaon minus, pion plus, pion minus, then the antiparticle will have the opposite charges, as you can see on the right-hand side. And we can find them in our data set, and we can try to measure, let's say, the number of events or the yield. Usually, this is happening with composing an invariant mass or looking at the mass spectrum of this particle. And the idea was to isolate the signal, which was our lambda particle here, against the rest of the background. You can see the horizontal line. This is the line where we see a bit of an excess of the particle with respect to an antiparticle, which was measured at 2%. This is a very interesting result because it was first found in these kind of particles. It's not enough to explain the whole matter-antimatter asymmetry, but it's a very first step towards this research at CERN. Then a bit on the rare decays. There are many different types of decays in the standard model, and they can happen with a different probability. For some of them, the probabilities are very low, and this we label with this variable called branching fraction. Can be at an order of 10 to the minus 9. As you can see here, this is the theory prediction. So how do you measure a particle that decays at an order of 10 to the minus 9? This is one of the latest LHCb measurement where we measured a value which is compatible with the standard model. And I will just illustrate in a few slides what was the case for this analysis. So the decay we wanted to look was a combination of two muons. The muons are electron-like particles, but they're heavier. And we classified these two tracks or two particles with their dimuon mass. So we compose the mass of this particle because we have access for this back in the experiment. And then the first thing we will need to look at is how to separate these two muons with respect to any kind of a random combination of these kind of particles that would not make a B meson. So you can have this combinatorial background, which is quite common in the collisions. So usually in analysis, there can be other approaches, but this is like, let's say, the standard approach where we use a boosted decision tree, where we use a simulation as a proxy for the signal where we know there is no background. And then we take part of the data where we think there is most of the background present, which is our proxy for the background in the training. And if you plot them against the BDT value, this is the plot on the left side. We can see that with some, let's say, with some cut on the BDT, we can reject most of the background, but still have quite a lot of signal. But you can also see that you will never reject all the background, so there will be still something to model at the end. Finding the optimal cut is usually some figure of merit. In this case, this one is quite common in particle physics, Punzi figure of merit, which is connected to the efficiency of the signal and the number of background events. And maximizing this gives the optimal cut point. Then, as I mentioned, we would expect still not really clean peak. So you can see this one plotted on the right-hand side where there's some tail on the right-hand side, and then there's also some bump on the left. And then one has to, let's say, make an attempt to identify all these contributions and where the signal is and how much of the signal is there, let's say, on the left and on the right-hand side. So what we usually do after we reject the combinatorial background, what we usually do is we make a simulation of all these or several different types of events that we might think they could contribute, and these are added in the fitting procedure of the mass. So the final result looks like something like this. So the signal is the one that we were looking in red. And then on all the others are different types of background contribution that we model either with simulation or we model differently. And this was the result that I showed a few slides ago. This is the branching fraction that was the probability of this decaying that was found. Then this is the third result that I want to discuss. So we can also, let's say, we can measure branching fraction, which is the probability, but we can also make ratios of these variables. And ratios are interesting because they probe, let's say, universalities in between different particles and how they would behave in the collisions. This in particular we can make, like, for example, the ratio of one particle decaying to another one into a specific lepton. In this case, these are electron-like muon or tau particle. And in the final state, there is a neutrino particle, which we don't manage to detect, essentially. So there's a bigger challenge in this kind of measurements because we do not have a clear mass peak. Everything is washed out because we have a missing information due to this escaping neutrino particle. If we measure this ratio and we see some discrepancy with respect to what we, let's say, see in theory, this would be an interesting quest to search for new particles or even confirm some new particles. Analysis-wise, so what's it happening when you measure this? Again, you look at the number of signal and number of, we call it normalization, so the other decay. And then you need to select the efficiency after all the selection of these, of finding these signal events. In addition, because there is some missing information, we construct something which is called a missing mass, where should correspond, let's say, to the mass of the neutrino. In this measurement, usually the energy of the lepton is added, and some transfer of momentum, which is labeled as q square. Not having a clear mass peak is not very nice, and therefore we need to let's say, control different types of backgrounds. And on top of the signal region, we also add different specialized, let's say, region, which are made with specific selection, where are enriched with some background that we want to, let's say, fit some information in our final fit. So the result looks something like this. These are the fit projection, let's say, on the top with the signal and all the different types of background. So just to tell you, the signal is the red. The signal is the orange and the red part, let's say, of the bins. As you can see, this is formed by background. Is very it's quite hard to control all this in a very precise way. Nevertheless, so these ratios yield an interesting result. They give something which is very different to what is expected in the standard model. It's on the order of 3.8 standard deviations. And let's say the big picture of all these, not only LHCb, all different experiments measure these kind of ratios. And the average of all this is given in the red. What is the prediction in the theory is the one in the black and blue points. This is interesting, and I think LHCb is doing quite a lot of effort into looking into these results further, either with a lot more data. For example, maybe we can confirm this discrepancy with a 5 sigma, and then we can label that this is some specific additional particle, or maybe we prove that this is some fluctuation or so. So there are many ongoing physics prospects here as well. Okay, I think I'm at the end. So I hope I gave an overview of the different types of analysis that can be done at the LHCb experiment at CERN. Our experiment has shown that we can do high precision flavor physics. We can measure particles very precisely and their properties. At the moment, we're taking data during this run 3 data taking period, where we have already recorded more than what we recorded in the previous 2 runs. We have a good data taking efficiency, 95%, and then also excellent quality for physics. We have quite a lot of challenges for the future, since we're upgrading, we're changing the energy of the collisions, and then we have to upgrade hardware-wise and software-wise all of our detector. However, all of this is a work in progress, and we try to tackle each of these challenges differently. And yeah, we're still looking forward to more collisions. Thanks a lot. I think that was all. Yes.